For the 10th round of the 2024 Formula One Championship, Scuderia Ferrari aims to perform at its best, as do Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, and Aston Martin among the top teams. To achieve this, the Italian side has developed a precise compromise setup that, along with the new updates that will be introduced, aims to improve the car's overall performance. However, other teams have also decided to present various updates, making the Spanish weekend at the 4.657-kilometer Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya undoubtedly important and worth watching closely. Ferrari aims to overturn the disappointing result from 2 weeks ago at the Circuit Gilles-Villeneuve in Montreal and confirm the good work done so far with the SF-24 single-seater. Currently, the first visible novelty on the Ferrari SF-24 in Barcelona is the rear wing, which presents itself in an entirely new form specific to the Spanish Grand Prix. The Barcelona track is renowned for being a sort of open-air wind tunnel. Fast corners and direction changes allow for a thorough evaluation of the Aero-Mechanical package of the cars. The roughly 4 kilometers of the Montmeló circuit will allow for assessment of the 676 project and the season's prospects. In fact, the Barcelona racetrack will serve as a crucial test in order to understand the relative strengths of the cars, the differences, and particularly the performance gaps. Without further ado, let's move on to the analysis of the rear wings chosen for Montmeló. Starting with Ferrari, the updated SF-24 version adopts a completely revised specification. Observing it, we see that it is a true compromise between previously used solutions. We have seen 3 specifications so far. The first version used in all the events until the Imola weekend, where the second, updated on the wingtips, appeared for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. In Monaco, a high downforce wing with a very pronounced main plane was used. Today in Spain, the main plane shows a larger wing surface, although the leading edge is less pronounced. As we can observe thanks to the various photos taken directly from the Circuit de Catalunya pit lane by reporters, the second flap has a significantly different shape compared to previous versions. The foil appears more hollowed out in the central area, with a decrease in incidence towards the ends of the profile. This is why this version of the wing mounted on the SF-24 aims to provide more downforce points to the Ferrari car, but, at the same time, should increase the aerodynamic efficiency of the device in question. This is undoubtedly a modification with significant importance for the Italian car. The DRS mobile flap is particularly interesting, as it is quite squared and has a larger surface area when the wing is open. This allows for greater efficiency with the DRS open and a good level of downforce with the flap closed. Observing the trailing edge of the rear wing, we notice the presence of the nolder, which generates more downforce without significantly impacting aerodynamic drag. As we know, Ferrari has always tried to produce as linear a learning curve as possible, without aggressively updating the rear wing of the car. This considered choice takes into account 2 factors. The first is top speeds, which Ferrari currently needs to try to increase by tailoring an appropriate setup to the track layout. By this, we mean the level of aerodynamic downforce, but not only that. The hybrid power must also have an adequate delivery strategy to help in acceleration and also on the straights to optimize the end of straight speed. The second factor starts from a consideration that teams often make in terms of the Grand Prix. In the race, in fact, the average pace that cars produce decreases significantly. The reason is simple. One of the fundamental parameters is tire management in long runs with a high amount of fuel on board. Therefore, in the desire to optimize the management of Pirelli tires, a clear decrease in speed through certain corners is always required. Speaking of Barcelona, we mean turns 3 and 4, where a lot of attention is needed during the race. These 2 corners are taken under load, a factor that must be highly considered in Formula One because the large amount of energy transferred into the compounds results in an increase in operating temperatures. This is the so-called overheating, an aspect that becomes crucial for tire management. Thus, the Prancing Horse team focuses more on the race regarding this aspect of setup, keeping in mind that they will have slightly less downforce than the Red Bull RB20 car. Red Bull is using the second most downforce-heavy specification they have available. The first is the one used on the streets of Monte Carlo in Monaco. For clarity, they have chosen the version already seen in Japan and Canada, where the leading edge is more pronounced compared to Ferrari, creating a greater pressure difference between the underside and the top of the profile. Even from the front view of the 2 wings, it is noticeable that the RB20's setup has a larger frontal area exposed to the airflow. The Milton Keynes team can afford this because deploying greater rear downforce at the expense of more drag is not a problem due to the high efficiency of the Austrian car. Additionally, to conclude the reasoning, some extra rear downforce corrects the slightly oversteering behavior that the Red Bull shows, especially in the medium-speed corner entries. A few extra kilos on the rear axle provide a lot of stability to the blue racing car. McLaren is not changing and maintains the decision made 2 weeks ago in the Canadian Grand Prix. The MCL38 has 3 specifications to choose from. In this case, the wing captured in the photos has already been used in several events this year. Among them are Bahrain, the first race of the calendar, and like Red Bull, the Japanese Grand Prix. Normally, the British car has excellent downforce generated from the floor. The papaya-colored cars tend to use slightly stiffer setups to properly utilize the entire underbody of the car. The reason is simple: to optimize high-speed corners. The MCL38 has good stability in this speed range, similar to Ferrari. If we talk about resistance to advancement, they can boast aerodynamic benefits that in turn allow them, like Red Bull, to adopt a few extra points of aerodynamic downforce on the car without paying too much on the straight. In recent events, the specification in question has only been used in Canada. For this reason, the element has not yet been thoroughly tested with the updated car. It will be interesting to see what kind of setup they can build. Finally, we come to Mercedes, an F1 team desperately trying to rectify the mistakes made in the recent past. Observing the W15, we realize that the rear wing version also shows a spoon profile, already seen in several championship events this year. The German cars will need to work particularly on temperatures to manage the compounds. We, therefore, expect a setup aimed at reducing sliding. Overall, it is more of a race-oriented setup. The same tire management discussion we had for Ferrari can be applied to the Brackley team. Was Ferrari's Monaco dominance the real picture of its current competitiveness in Formula One, or its desultory Montreal showing? The answer is neither, and that's not something that might have been fully understood within the team under previous regimes. That's largely down to the leadership style of team principal Fred Vasseur, which has inevitably been tested by the past couple of weeks. After Charles Leclerc's victory in the Monaco Grand Prix, Fred Vasseur was asked about the team's progress. His response was to warn that the worst-case scenario would be to imagine that it's done, that it will be like this until the end. He went on to warn of different track characteristics to come, keeping his feet planted firmly on the ground. He took the same approach in very different circumstances after Ferrari failed to get either car to the finish or into Q3, 2 weeks later. Then, his words of wisdom were, "We are not world champions after a good weekend, and we are not nowhere after a tough weekend." That's typical of Fred Vasseur, who attempts to hold the middle ground and take a realistic view of performance and progress. A calm head in victory and defeat is essential for Ferrari's progress and helps to keep the team's attention laser-focused on the job in hand. Forget the results, focus on the objectives. Canada was the worst moment for the team on track of his stint at Maranello, so the Spanish Grand Prix weekend is the first real test of whether he has been able to keep Maranello calm and focused with his stoic attitude when the whole system is stress-tested. It would be a surprise if has failed to do so.